Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Harry Went Halloween Party with Hermione. So do 4 blue hearts comment, be sure to subscribe. Be to our channel and like this video and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Harry x Hermione uncensored spicy version, link in description. It was Harry's 4th year. Harry was sitting restlessly on the far side of the bench near the main doors to the Great Hall. Only the people who knew him well noticed his state of mind. Those people were Ron, Hermione and the Weasley twins. Hermione gave Harry a look, and he sighed. "Yes, I am worried," he said. "This is my 4th Halloween at Hogwarts, Hermione, and you know that nothing good has come this day ever since I stepped into this school." "True," Hermione said, thinking on the past 3 years. First year, the mountain troll let in by Quirrell, and, here Ron turned red and looked awesome. Eden would not meet her eyes because he knew that he was responsible for Hermione being in danger that night. Hermione noticed and huffed. "It's okay, Ron. You are no longer the prat you were then." And could not help but smirk as he blushed. Smirk dropping, she said seriously, "Besides, you sacrificed yourself on the chess obstacle for us to move forward in the course." George spoke next. Second year, Halloween. The cat's petrification and the air of Slytherin accusations. It was Fred who spoke up after George, as expected. "Last year, a mass murderer's dorm visit. Maybe this year, the jinx will be broken, and here." He grinned. "If not, we will prank the pants off the ones who spoil it." Harry could not help but laugh along with the rest. Soon, it was the time for the drawing of names and Harry became restless again. When Cedric's name came up as the Hogwarts champion, he breathed a sigh of relief. But things were not meant to go normal for Harry Potter. The goblet of fire spat. A 4th chitin when Dumbledore said Harry's name, and asked him to come forward and join the other champions in the antechamber, something snapped within him. He rose to his feet and said, "No, N.D." Turning towards the rest of the students, he said heatedly, "And before any of you run your mouths saying that I am a cheat and got my name in it for glory, let me remind you, I already have the fame. And I don't need 1,000 galleons to fill my account." Then noticing Ron, he saw his face was going red and immediately Harry knew that his best friend's jealous side was about to rear its ugly head. Looking at him, he said, "My true close friends never forget how much I hate people goggling at my scar, and how much I hate my fame because you cannot easily make true friends, not knowing whether the person sees you or your fame." Still staring hard at Ron, he said, "They also know that the fame I earned is a result of my parents dying and me surviving. I would rather have my parents with me and all the fame or gold in the world which can't buy me a set of parents or a family full of siblings who see you for yourself and truly love you even if they may not directly show their love." The last part, he said, looking with affection and sadness at Fred, George and Ginny, and then turned his hard look at Ron again and said, "They also know that I would not consider them friends if they were jealous prats." Ron, on hearing Harry, first turned red with shame and then pale with realization of what his mouth going to spout out of jealousy, and then turned red with shame again on seeing the looks of disgust aimed at him by Hermione, his siblings and his dorm mates who knew him well. Harry then turned to look at Dumbledore and said, "Going into that room would be like accepting to be a champion. On which I don't want to be, as I did not put my name in the goblet." And preempting anybody's accusation, he said, "And before anybody accuses me of having an older person put my name in, let me tell you I did not do that either. If you still accuse me, then that means 2 things. 1, he said holding up a finger, "You did not hear what I said earlier or chose to ignore it at your pleasure because you don't like me, or 2, he said holding up another finger, "You think that I, a 14-year-old boy, could hoodwink Dumbledore's magical age line." He said, enunciating each syllable in the words, Dumbledore, and magical. Taking a pause, said, "If you think the later, then you are a bunch of morons and I can't do anything about your mental abilities. Get a mind healer to see you." This generated titters from those who believed Harry. "If you believe the prior, then you can go to hell. I can't and won't do anything in case of those who don't believe me. I have learned while living with the foe, all relatives of mine, that you can't please everyone." Taking the chance of another pause, Dumbledore interjected, "Regardless, we need to examine the goblet and decide on what to do next. Then let's do it publicly. Let things come truly to light rather than you letting your inactions do the talking and let people make wrong assumptions about me as usual," said Harry. What on earth do you mean, Mr. Potter? When have we not acted? Asked Professor McGonagall. The rest of the champions had come into the hall after waiting for a long time. Cedric leaned towards his head of house, Professor Sprout, to ask, and she whispered back. Harry snorted at the question of his own head of house. Really? He asked, and then continued. Oh, well, loads of times. First year, when we came to you with the Informati on the Philosopher's Stone and you dismissed us out of hand, because of which we, 3 first years, had to go and save it, and then I faced the wraith of Voldemort. Here, many people shrieked on hearing the dreaded name. Oh, get a backbone. People. Voldemort is a coward, like any bully, because only cowards attack when your back is turned or attack one person when they have a group to back them like pack of dogs. He sighed and let go of that particular topic, sensing that this was no time to talk sense about Voldemort. He turned his attention back to the front of the hall and continued with the current topic. Second year. When everyone was calling me an heir of Slytherin and when you teachers knew that I wasn't responsible, knowing that when Colin was petrified, I was lying in the hospital after the Bludger accident. You all did nothing to stop the name calling and bullying. There are many other instances, where you teachers have not acted. I am sure that if others are asked, they too will tell you about their own experiences. Coming back to me, you let a professor bully his students. This would not be tolerated in a Muggle school. Professor Snape would have been out of the school ages ago. If you really cared about the students like they do in the Muggle world. He is also a professor who sees my father in me and loathes me for it, thinking I am like him. He does not see my mother in me, who I have heard was best friends with him at school. Everyone here thinks I have lived a spoilt rich life, including Professor Snape. He turned to Snape as he said so. Do you know, Professor? Where was my first Hogwarts letter addressed to and what my relatives told me about my parents before I learned about the magical world and the truth of my parents? Snape was ashamed on how he let himself not see his dear friend. Lillian assumed that because he is a boy resembled mostly like James Potter, he would act like one too. He also had a feeling of foreboding that a real horror story was about to be unveiled. He did not have to wait long as Harry continued while looking between Professors Dumbledore, Snape and McGonagall. It was addressed to the cupboard under the stairs, Wick. H was where the Dursleys for 10 years forced me to live when I was not otherwise working as their personal house elf. Harry was screaming by the end of it. My dear relatives used to tell me that my parents were unemployed and who died in a car crash while they were drunk. My relatives call me a freak, and until primary school, I did not know my name, but was referred to as a freak or boy, he said, still screaming. Dobby popped in and gave him a glass of water, surprising him with his presence. He murmured, "Thanks, Dobby," while thinking about it. The interruption also calmed him a bit. Taking a sip, he shook himself from his thoughts about Dobby. That was for later. He returned his attention to the front of the hall where the teachers, champions and the school heads and guests were assembled. When we began primary school, and I brought home my scorecard, thinking that at least now, my uncle and aunt will think I am not a freak and will be happy with my hard work and studies, it was to find that I was wrong. I had scored more than Dudley, and so, in the Dursleys' opinion, I must have used my freakish ways to score better than their Dudikins and was of course punished for it. Th 5 days of being locked in the same cupboard which was my bedroom and with no food and once a day loo privilege. From then on, I decided to deliberately score lower than Dudley, and I think this same habit stayed with me until I began Hogwarts. Only recently have I realized that the Dursleys won't give a damn about my Hogwarts scores because these are, in their words, freakish subjects. Snape had rapidly paled while hearing about the abuse and now, on hearing about the abuse, surprisingly, I might add, looked angry on Harry's behalf and was giving Dumbledore his grade 1 angry look which makes his Newt students wet their pants. McGonagall too had turned her ire on Dumbledore and looked ready to tear strips of his long beard off him. Dumbledore was, meanwhile, looking horrified at the consequences of not listening to Minerva all those years ago, and he was looking very much the way a Muggle of his more than 100 years of age would look. Meanwhile, Hermione was observing the others, especially Professor Sprout, as she being Cedric's head of house would not have been happy with what she might initially think is Harry stealing the Hufflepuff house's limelight. After all, it had been a long time after which their house had an opportunity to shine and prove that they are not a house of dumb folks. Professor. Sprout saw Hermione looking between her and Cedric and instinctively knew what was going through her mind. Having already realized the truth and also having seen the byplay between Harry and Ron, she knew what must have been going through Hermione's mind. She looked down Asha. Med that on seeing Harry's name come out, she had instantly forgotten her 3 years of experience with Harry as a student and how he would shy away from unnecessary attention. During the pause, Dumbledore walked down the steps of the dais towards Harry. His wand was still in his hand. He had used it to put out the candlelights so that only the light from the pumpkin lanterns shone. Harry, having lost much trust in Dumbledore after learning from a law book about how Veritaserum or a pensive memory could have easily helped clear Sirius' name, and thinking that Dumbledore might try to force him in some way to accept the participation in the tournament, fluidly drew his wand but held it casually in his hand pointed down. Dumbledore was saddened by his lack of trust, knowing that even if it was pointed seemingly down and in a non-threatening manner, Harry was quite capable of putting an adversary down by cursing their legs or groin, as he had proved on more than a few occasions recently. While Albus Dumbledore would be able to take care of himself, the look of distrust still broke his heart. He pocketed his wand and asked a question that Harry had not expected at all. "Harry, please help this old man. Correct the mistakes he did regarding your home and school life. If you want to help me, then it would also be better if you call Madame Amelia Bones, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, to help dispense justice not only regarding the hell you have put me through at the Dursleys, but the danger and abuse I have gone through here, and also to deal with this Triwizard situation. I have heard that she is fair and just and wouldn't forget critical laws that could help save an innocent man from being kissed, unlike you, Professor," Harry said with the road Professor being used only as a courtesy with no sign of respect in his tone, and Dumbledore knew that. "Have her bring Veritaserum and a pensieve too, so that there can be no doubts about what I am going to say," he added. "As you wish, Harry," said Dumbledore, looking every year of his age. He transfigured a few utensils into quill, ink, and parchment, wrote a letter, and called for Fawkes, High's Phoenix familiar, who flame transported the letter to the DMLE. A few minutes later, there was another flash of flame and Madame Bones appeared, holding onto his red and gold tail feathers. As soon as she appeared, she looked around, took in the faces and mainly the one standing nearest to her, the boy who lived whom she recognized from the famous scar, and Dumbledore, and asked, "All right, I am here. Who's died?" And just like that, the dam broke. Harry could not help laughing. The time he recovered, it was tinged with hysterics. He had been wound so tight with tension. No one commented on it, though. They all understood. Dumbledore did look relieved that Harry was still capable of positive emotions after his rant. "Sorry, ma'am, I could not help it," said Harry. "It was I who requested your presence." "Understandable if you have been having a go at the headmaster." "Well, here I am." "Tell me," she asked. Then, smirking at Harry's look of shock at the fact that she had deduced what must have happened, she said, "Mr. Potter, I have at least 20 years of experience dealing with not only criminals but normal folk while solving crimes. One look at Dumbledore and your faces told me what must have happened. Might it not be good to take this somewhere more private?" asked Bagman tentatively. "No," said Harry. "I want everyone to witness this, though you may want to send the first and second years to their dorms as they may not have the stomach for it, being too young. Prefects, lead the first and second years back to their common rooms and stand watch so that none of them sneak back down to eavesdrop." Spoke up Professor McGonagall. 5 points to Gryffindor, for your thoughtfulness, Mr. Potter, said Professor Snape, shocking all and sundry. When did the sun begin to rise from the west? People wondered. Snape though was looking only at Harry, specifically, his eyes, as if he was seeking redemption from Lily, his dearest and only friend whose eyes, her son had inherited and whom he had treated so unjustly until now. McGonagall's instructions had some students grumble, and some even tried to find an excuse to stay, but the prefects, though themselves disappointed at not getting to watch, were having none of it. Meanwhile, Amelia moved aside and sent off a Patronus. It was a ghostly silver grizzly bear. Harry observed this and asked her why did she conjure a Patronus in the absence of any Dementor. When Amelia turned to him, Dumbledore interjected, saying that Harry can cast a corporeal Patronus which he used to drive 100 Dementors away last year. Amelia was awed. Turning to Harry, he said, "A Patronus can also be used to send messages to anyone anywhere. Just conjure it and tell it either verbally or mentally to whom and what you want to say. That's all there is to it." Their attention was drawn by a bit of a commotion as the Aurors and what seemed to be a couple of healers had arrived and were trying to make their way through the crowd of students making their exit. Harry then pulled out the Marauders map which he had taken to carrying with him ever since he had the vision related to Voldemort in the summer. He looked at the map to acquaint himself with the new names and was about to close it when Fred and George, who were looking over his shoulder, stopped him and placed 2 fingers both at the name Barty Crouch, but the surprising thing was the Great Hall in the map showed 2 of them. One Crouch who actually looked to be Professor Moody standing next to the goblet seemingly running tests on it, and the other, right next to Bagman, observing the students going out. All 3 looked at each other, each thinking who to tell because explaining the map and its authenticity would take time. Harry then took the decision out of their hands, strode straight to Professor Snape, who he remembered had glimpsed the map resulting in their confrontation in the Shrieking Shack last year, and silently pointed out the things to him while also murmuring, "The one who put my name in the Goblet of Fire is here and this map never lies. One is disguised." Snape, who had seen quite some weird things in his life, counted this at the top of the list. A son of his childhood nemesis seeking his help. And 2 Bartemius Crouches. Then he remembered that Barty Crouch Sr.'s son had been accused of being a Death Eater and later died in Azkaban. Knowing the backstory of his death, it didn't take him time to put 2 and 2 together. Now the only thing that remained was to find out which one was the real McCoy. "Call your house elf, Dobby. I need his help," ordered Snape. Very soon, Dobby was by their side. Dumbledore turned around from talking to his deputy and was surprised to see Harry, his potions master Severus Snape, the Weasley twins, and a house elf of all people whispering to each other. What on earth? He wondered, and he was even more surprised at the unusual group exchanging evil grins. He didn't have long to find out. 2 balloons had happy red on the heads of Barty Crouch and Professor Moody. What no one knew was that they didn't contain water but a potion called Thieves' Downfall, used by the goblins as one of their automatic security measures for their biggest vaults. It washes away all magical concealments. The balloons exploded over the 2 supposed Crouches' heads, drawing everyone's attention, but everyone was soon shocked to NCE by their effect on one, which was quite telling. Professor Moody's figure was speedily altering and soon in place, lying down panting with a real leg and eye, was the one whom the older folks instantly recognized and had thought dead. Barty Crouch Jr. "Stupefy, Incarcerus," cried 4 voices. Harry and Fred had shot the stunners while George and Professor Snape cast the rope-binding spells. "What in the name of Merlin's most baggy pants is going on here?" shouted Madame Bones, breaking everyone out of their shock. Amelia strode over to the unconscious and bound person who was now being covered by many wands. She looked at who it was and also took in the detached wooden leg and magical eye. "Merlin," she exclaimed. Then, whirling at the 4 who had taken him down first, said, "Explain." Harry stepped forward. "Madame Bones, I have a map which was created by my father and his 3 friends who used to call themselves Marauders during their school days," said Harry, pulling out the map and unfolding it. "It shows the live position of everyone in the school. I have been carrying it around with me ever since something which happened a couple of months back." "What?" asked Amelia, looking up from examining it. "That is not for discussion now. We can talk later. Back to the present. I had pulled this out to read the names of new arrivals, which is when Fred and George noticed 2 Barty Crouches in the Great Hall, and I decided to show it to Professor Snape," continued Harry. "Why him? Why not me or Professor Dumbledore or even your head of house? After all, it's well known that Professor Snape isn't exactly friendly with you," asked Madame Bones. "Understatement of the century," exclaimed Fred and George together, grinning at Snape, who turned red. Snape, the bat of the dungeons, turning red with embarrassment. "Imagine that." Grinning, Harry continued, "I took it to him because he had seen the map last year and thus would know the names are genuine. I will now let Professor Snape tell you about the later part." She turned to Snape. Having known that Barty Crouch Jr. died around the same time as his sick mother, it wasn't hard to put 2 and 2 together. The question now was which of the two is Barty Crouch Sr. and which one is his son. He then went on to explain the thieves' downfall potion and the twins' contribution to the plan. All the while, Barty Crouch Sr. had been quiet, and no one had paid attention to him as the thieves' downfall had also lifted the imperious curse which was on him. Suddenly, he spoke up, making the others whirl towards him. His words shocked everyone to the core. "Amelia, I was imperioused by Voldemort. You know who is dead," cried Bagman. "No, he isn't," said Harry calmly, and then looking at Dumbledore, he said, "Are you going to tell them, or should I?" Dumbledore, recognizing that the time to keep everything close to his chest was at an end and also realizing that Harry would use Veritaserum and Pensieve anyway if he refused, decided to tell them beginning right from Harry's first year. Before he could begin, Amelia said that she would call the minister, the head of Unspeakables, and the head of the Auror Corps to the castle as this was too big. Also, they needed to find the real Moody. She dispatched a couple of her Aurors to Moody's classroom and a few others to fetch the three but instructed them not to tell anything except that they were needed urgently. When they came, and Cornelius looked like he had been in the middle of drinking while at home, he was given the sobering potion. Then before Dumbledore could begin, Harry interrupted and insisted, to begin with his memories in the Pensieve anyway so that there would not be any doubts, and also said that he would be willing to be questioned under Veritaserum. Everyone agreed and Harry pulled several memories out of his head and placed them in the Auror Grade Pensieve. Then, Madame Bones tapped a couple of runes and the memory started playing in a holographic projection. Unknown to them, Harry had placed also the memories of Trelawney's prophecy about the Death Eater breaking loose to help the rise of the Dark Lord, the confrontation in the Shrieking Shack with Pettigrew, and also his vision of Voldemort and Pettigrew over the summer. To say everyone was shaken would be an understatement. Some students and even staff had vomited or looked about to faint, quite a few of the students being Slytherins themselves. Cornelius could not say that they were fantasies because not only was this an Auror Grade Pensieve which could not be fooled but also unluckily for him, the memories was that of his arresting Hagrid and saying that the ministry has got to be seen doing something as a reason for the arrest. Also, the fact that Pettigrew was alive, and that Cornelius had refused to believe the boy who lived in his third year and almost had an innocent man kissed, meant that Cornelius' career was over. Amelia realized she had a lot of work now. Now, it was time for Rufus Scrimgeour, the head of the Auror Corps, to interrogate Crouch Jr. Under Veritaserum administered by the Mind Healer, he not only revealed that it was he who put Harry's name in the goblet of fire but also several other things on being questioned. He confirmed that Pettigrew was alive but also that Voldemort was too, and in what form and where. Also, he said that Sirius Black had never been a supporter of the Dark Lord when asked by Harry. As the interrogation was drawing to a close, Amelia suddenly asked, "Name all the willing Death Eaters and unmarked supporters of Voldemort." Being ill under the effects of the truth serum, he started regurgitating all the names. Among the first ones named was Lucius Malfoy. "That's preposterous. Lucius Malfoy has my utmost trust. Donations to good causes and all that," Cornelius exclaimed. Amelia gave him a withering look and said, "Minister, you are already on a thin rope as it is. I was going to call for a vote of no confidence in the wise Nomote against you considering the two instances of injustice: 1, your illegal arresting of Professor Rubius Hagrid, and 2, your decision to not involve me when 2 students told you about Pettigrew being alive and decided to believe a person who even the headmaster knew to have had a hatred for James Potter and Sirius Black even after school. If you had managed to get Black kissed, then not only considering the fact that he is innocent but also a lord, the head of an ancient and noble house, it would be the veil of death for you. It could still be Azkaban for you, anyway. But I am willing to cut you some slack." When others looked at her, she said, "This is a one-time plea bargain. If you give me a written authority to call in those Death Eaters who walked away claiming Imperius and question them under Veritaserum, I will allow you to later graciously resign, saying that after learning about the mistakes you made regarding Hagrid, Sirius Black, and a few others, you decided that you would not remain in a seat of power over others." At the look of worry on his face, she said, "Don't worry, we will take a subtle approach with the questioning of the pardoned Death Eaters. Leave it all to me." Cornelius sighed and nodded. He did not have a choice anyway. Amelia took a deep breath and called a few people toward her. Harry, meanwhile, was speaking with Hermione and his other friends. He believed that even if Voldemort was killed and his followers arrested, many of the old beliefs of people would remain the same. The fear of werewolves, the prejudice against Muggle-borns and half-bloods at work, the disdain for Muggle science and technology, etc. The current Muggle studies syllabus was a joke amongst the Muggle-borns and raised. With the purging of evil, the purging of obsolete beliefs was also necessary. So, while Amelia, the two department heads, and Dumbledore in his advisory capacity as an expert on Voldemort, were putting together a plan about taking Voldemort alive with O.T. letting his wraith form escape from the body of the baby he was currently possessing. As per Crouch Jr.'s statement, Harry, Hermione, and few others were planning on how to bring the Muggle study's curriculum up to date and drag Victorian magical Britain kicking and screaming into the modern world. Surprisingly, Snape was also contributing. Being the son of a Muggle and a pureblood witch, he was as well aware of the advancements made by Muggles but had been forced to put on an act. But now hopefully, with the takedown of the Dark Lord, he would be free from leading this double life. Things were finally looking up. Albus, why do you want us to capture him alive? Asked Amelia. Why not kill the dark bastard there itself? Because Tom had made Horcruxes, said Dumbledore, shocking Croaker. Horcruxes, as in plural? Asked Croaker. Yes, said Dumbledore, not at all surprised that the head unspeakable would be privy to the forbidden knowledge. Could you tell us mere mortals what a Horcrux is? Asked Rufus, his mane of hair making him look like an aging lion. Dumbledore sighed. A Horcrux is magic most foul. It is made by a person wishing to cheat death. The person places a piece of his soul in an enchanted container after performing an act, most heinous. Murder. Croaker quietly added, then turned to Dumbledore. How many? In my opinion, asked Dumbledore, understanding his actual question. 7 plus the lone part of Voldemort's soul, which is possessing a baby now. He surreptitiously looked at Harry, but before he could move his head back, Harry, who was listening with half an ear while discussing the Muggle studies curriculum, caught his glance and then a thought hit him like a bludger. Is my scar a Horcrux just like Riddle's diary, Professor? Is that why I see old feel his presence through my scar in my first year and had that vision over the summer before this year? Asked Harry, suddenly not feeling well. A gamut of emotions ran across Dumbledore's face. Shocked that Harry had deduced it so quickly, and saddened that Harry should bear such an emotional burden. It was amply clear to Harry that he had hit it spot on. He blacked out, but Fred and George quickly caught him before he could hit the floor. They laid him on the bench, and while Madame Pomfrey rushed to renovate him, Fred, George, Hermione, and even Neville and Ginny took defensive positions around him with their wands pointed outwards. Soon the other housemates who had believed in Harry after seeing his memories followed, first amongst them, the rest of his Quidditch team. Even Snape took a similar stance. Ron moved towards them with his wand out and was saddened to see his friends and siblings point their wands at him and look at him with suspicion. He lowered his wand and said, I am here to support Harry, guys. I have been a jealous prat and a git till now. There, I have said it, okay, but I would never raise a wand against my first friend. He pleaded. They re-aimed their wands at Dumbledore. And the ministry officials present there. What am I missing? Can someone tell me? Asked Professor McGonagall to the students and the lone teacher just as Harry got up and the defenders moved to cover him. It was Professor Sprout who spoke up. Most of them have put 2 and 2 together. Think Minerva, if Harry's scar is a Horcrux, then I would not put it past any ministry official to kill Mr. Potter for greater good, to be able to finish off you-know-who once and for all. Even Albus too, she said, looking at Dumbledore. He must have suspected some of these things after coming. To know of the scar hurting, and his suspicions would have been confirmed by the diary. But as usual, he kept it close to his vest, thinking there was no solution instead of trying to seek help. Right, Albus? Interjected McGonagall, now with her wand out too. Pomona, Minerva, I confess I believe that Harry would have to sacrifice himself in the end, for Voldemort to be killed, but I would never murder a child in cold blood. Trust me, said Dumbledore. You have yourself to blame for our lack of faith in you. I can say that having seen those memories, said little Professor Flitwick, also pulling his wand out. Why not excise it through grafting, if the soul piece is just stuck to his scar? Asked Hermione suddenly. Grafting. What's that, Miss Granger? Asked a curious Croaker. It is a key. ND of Muggle surgery, and that is how the infected or damaged skin is removed and skin from another part of the body is layered over it by the doctors. Here, though, we will let the Muggle surgeons operate upon the skin first. Then after someone obliviates them and leads them away, Madame Pomfrey can heal the operated area with spells and potions, said Hermione, in one breath. Then, looking at Harry, she grinned and said, that will also solve your problem of people staring at your scar. Marry me, Hermione, said Harry jokingly. Impossible, said Igor Karkaroff. There were many others looking skeptical, too. What? Hermione marrying Harry or grafting? Asked Fred and George in their typical twin speak, splitting the second sentence into two, generating laughter in the Great Hall, breaking the tension a bit. That Muggles have a solution for magical injuries, said Karkaroff haughtily. That really got Hermione's ire up. Look, all of you, she said while glaring at Karkaroff, while you have your magic. The Muggles have science and technology. It is our answer to your way of life. It can do what your magic can't and vice versa. Taking a deep breath, Hermione continued while Snape, McGonagall, and many others watched on in amusement as the brunette tore into him. You think that because you have magic, you are godlike and can rule over others. We are capable of things that you never imagined. Have you ever been to the moon, invented a weapon that can easily destroy a city in one go, watch a game happening live in another part of the world from the comfort of your home, or create devices that can allow you to watch live what's happening inside an ailing body without cutting into it? You would have known about all this if you had let go of your prejudice and your superiority complex. Croaker tried to bring the subject back to track. If as Miss Granger believes the scar can be removed through grafting, then let's say we do so, but that later. First, we need to capture Tom Riddle, his snake. And Pettigrew, and also ensure none of the students here warn their parents, he said, looking around. Amelia immediately snapped out an order to her Aurors to not let any stud ent out of their sight, and her orders were followed by Dumbledore vanishing the house tables and conjuring sleeping bags for the students. Leaving Professors Sprout and Flitwick in charge, they moved the discussion to the antechamber. Only Hermione, Ron, the twins, Neville and Ginny followed the party in. The rest of the students were content to stay out. Once inside, Professor McGonagall magically expanded the room to accommodate everyone, and then Croaker conjured what looked to be a Muggle satellite map of Little Hangleton, where Riddle Manor, Voldemort's base, was supposed to be. Hermione looked at him with a raised eyebrow, and he, sensing the obvious question in her eyes, smiled and gently said, just because I don't know about grafting, Miss Granger, it doesn't mean I am a complete ignoramus when it comes to the Muggle world. She blushed. Then turning his attention back to the map, and pointing at a spot, he said, we will portkey a team of Aurors and Ward Masters with Obliviators going in first. In order to set up Muggle repelling charms at this spot here so that Muggles don't venture where the rest of the team later portkeys in. It's 200 meters from the Riddle Manor. We will jog the rest of the way under invisibility, scent masking, and aura masking spells. Before we plan the attack, the Ward Masters will analyze and give me a report on the enchantments surrounding the manor. Then we will decide on the next step. Knowing that the Unspeakables comprise magical researchers and inventors who work for the Intelligence Wing and the DMLE, Hermione asked, Sir, has your Department invented a gas which could put people to sleep as some Muggle-made gases can? While Croaker nodded, Harry, recognizing the look, chuckled and said, You again have a plan, Hermione. Yes, I do, she said, smiling. What are you thinking, Miss Granger? Asked Amelia. First, your team will require infrared goggles, said Hermione. Turning to the entire room, she then said, Infrared goggles would allow the men to see the people in the manor based upon their heat signatures, even if they are behind walls. The people will appear bright yellow or red through the goggles because of the warm human body temperature. While a snake, being a cold-blooded creature, will appear bluish. Then, turning to Croaker, she said, once you have determined their positions, charm the knockout gas container so that you can detonate it remotely. Then, as the headmaster did in the Great Hall, it's only a matter of making it appear in their room through conjuration. Make the bomb appear in a blind spot and then detonate it. The infrared goggles will help you choose the best place. Once the inhabitants are knocked out, your ward masters can do their job and then the Aurors can move in after casting bubblehead charms upon themselves. May I suggest something, Hermione? Ron spoke up hesitantly, not sure whether he had been forgiven. Hermione turned to look at him. Instead of wasting time in trying to break the wards, have some houses elves don the bubblehead charms, pop into the rooms, and magically bind and transport the prisoners to Mr. Croaker's chosen destination. They are not affected by wards here as well, and most folks underestimate them enough to not place anti-elf wards on their homes. I don't even know whether such wards exist. Have the men on standby outside though, just in case things go awry, said Ron. That's brilliant, both of you, exclaimed Professor Dumbledore. Ron looked at first relieved that Hermione had not started off on a rant about slavery of house elves, then turned red at receiving praise from the headmaster himself. Everyone else seemed impressed, too. He seldom received praise from anybody. Almost everyone in the room was blown by the sheer simplicity of the entire plan and the minimal risk involved. Croaker seemed to know about infrared goggles from his expression. The head unspeakable immediately portkeyed out with Rufus to implement the plan after a brief discussion with Amelia. Amelia then racked her brains for a plan to deal with the Death Eaters and roped in Snape and Dumbledore to help. Meanwhile, Harry drew Hermione and his classmates' attention back to the topic of introducing the magically raised people to the modern Muggle culture and advancements. Professor McGonagall suggested making Muggle studies compulsory for all years and Hermione suggested introducing primary school education that would cause an early mixing of both the Muggle and magically raised wizards and witches, thus the two sides would get comfortable with both worlds from a young age. Also, it could lessen the instances of accidental magic in the Muggle world if the children would learn control early on. Everyone liked the ideas being put forward. Once this current mess was dealt with, they would all work on creating a workable proposal to be brought before the relevant authorities. An hour had passed while they had been discussing the finer points, when the badge on Amelia's cloak glowed green twice, making her look pleased though unable to believe herself despite it. The Little Hangleton mission has been a total success. No casualties, she calmly declared. Everyone in the room gave a loud cheer. Now only the Death Eaters needed to be weeded out and the Hogwarts education system to be revolutionized. Shouldn't be too hard. After hearing about the success of the mission, the adults in the antechamber decided to continue the rest of the discussion the next day as it was late and sent Harry and company to find sleeping bags for themselves after giving Harry and the other champions the instructions for the first task, of course. The new day dawned bright and Harry woke up feeling confused about why he was feeling so good. Then, remembering everything that happened last night, a big smile lit his face. The students were still confined to the Great Hall and so was the minister because of his close friendship with Lucius Malfoy. His wand had been temporarily confiscated. They didn't want him alerting his close confidant even if his eyes seemed to have been opened and he had promised full support. Magical expansion charms were liberally used to turn the space within the Great Hall into classrooms with silencing spells cast to ensure no disturbance. Amelia had not had much sleep. The first thing she did on returning to the Ministry in the morning was to cancel the kiss on sight order against Sirius Black that was still in effect. Somehow, some way, Fudge's sidekick, Dolores Umbridge came to know about it. Both Fudge and Umbridge had been encouraged into a hardline position about the Black case by Lucius Malfoy claiming that his son was the Black heir and a promise of a share of the Black fortune had till now served as a nice enticement. Amelia very much hated she who wears pink and looks like a toad. Amelia gave her a gist of what happened last night without letting her know the confidential information, and when Umbridge looked ready to blow her top, she expertly deflated her, saying that Cornelius himself had given the orders. Umbridge still didn't believe it and tried to stop her. All this on top of what she heard last night, made Amelia snap. Orders. Arrest this vile woman for being a hindrance to the DMLE and take her to the interrogation cell 5. Have Senior Auror Kingsley and the trainee Auror Tonks sent in to dose her and interrogate her, said Amelia curtly. You can't do this, cried Umbridge. I have done this and I will have you leaking all your darkest secrets to us in no time. You won't get the plea bargain that I gave Fudge. Jail, sweet jail, Dolores. said Amelia with an evil smirk and then nodded at the Aurors who had already handcuffed her. Once Umbridge was led out, she called for Art, her Weasley and Croaker and briefed Arthur on the entirety of what had happened. He was left feeling pale and asked for something strong to drink. Amelia called her elf to bring her favorite, Indian spiced tea. Or masala chai as her Indian friends called it, but then added a dash of Ogden's old fire whiskey to the same. Taking a fortifying sip of the aromatic brew, Arthur asked, "Now what?" "Now, we need a strong excuse to bring all the supposedly imperious Death Eaters together and have them spill out the truth in a way that doesn't threaten others' safety once they realize that they have blabbed," said Amelia while taking a sip of her own. Arthur mulled over it, taking another sip of the really tasty tea. He would have to ask Amelia about procuring some for him. Molly would love it. Instead of involving innocent people to not arouse suspicion, I suggest an invitation cum portkey from Cornelius on a high-quality parchment to all these Death Eaters to his home for either breakfast, lunch, or dinner. The portkeys will be set for different times and locations within the minister's house. Cornelius himself won't be there, but Aurors, hid wizards, and possibly unspeakables polyjuiced as him, asked Arthur, looking at Croaker towards the end. "Brilliant plan, Arthur," exclaimed Amelia and looked at Croaker herself. "Brilliant indeed, but an anti-veritaserum potion might keep the disguised interrogator from getting the truth out of the paranoid or cautious ones. The MI6 though have truth serums that won't be blocked by the same," said Croaker, looking back at Amelia, who nodded. "MI6?" asked a puzzled Arthur. "They are the intelligence wing of the Muggle government. Very clever folks. Our Magical Intelligence 7 or MI7 is based on their way of operating actually, though the purebloods don't know it," said Croaker, smiling slightly. "The Muggles have an intelligence wing?" asked Arthur, shocked. Sighing exasperatedly, Croaker then sharply said, "Arthur, your world has been spark plugs, rubber ducks, and electricity. Come out of it. People claim that you are the ministry's expert on all things Muggle because you head the misuse of Muggle artifacts office, and yet you can't even spell electricity, which you call electricity. The Muggle world, Arthur, is much bigger, more modern, and more developed than what you have been led to believe by an outdated curriculum. If you ignore the magic that they lack, then they are actually way more developed than us. They can instantly send messages to each other, for example, while we rely on owls, messenger patronuses, uncomfortable flow calls. Or in the case of the ministry, the interdepartmental memos. Don't treat them like amusing pets. But this is all for later. Although, I do think Miss Granger and Mr. Potter would welcome you into their discussion, which will be an eye-opening experience for you. I am sure the discussion is going to resume soon. Now, let's get back to this Death Eater matter." Arthur turned red lightly at being given such a talking to. The three then spent an hour fine-tuning the plan, as there were some Death Eaters like McNair, not highly placed enough that they should warrant such an invitation. It would give rise to suspicion. Once the pesky little details were ironed out, Croaker left to meet the head of a special MI6 division that comprised of Muggle-borns, squibs, and those Muggles who were in the know due to being family to the Muggle-borns or half-bloods. It had been formed by one of the previous Muggle prime ministers to keep an eye on the happenings of the magical world. Arthur was surprised to learn about this, as only those magically sworn in were privy to it. Arthur too had to take the oath never to talk about it without permission. This operation too was executed flawlessly. It had been named Mission Cleansing and the participants had been carefully chosen. Under the influence of the Muggle truth serums, those who were discovered to have lied about being Imperiu said and showed no remorse for the crimes they had committed, were quietly shipped off to Azkaban to be publicly tried later. They had also been asked whether Voldemort had entrusted them with something for safekeeping, like the diary. The answers to that question were negative. Amelia had meanwhile, with Croaker's help, retired the Azkaban warden and replaced him with one of the middle-aged Muggle-borns who had gone to one of the American magical schools and then later joined MI6, a special branch. He had come highly recommended from MI6 as he was also a Master Occlumens. Being a Master Occlume, NS added another mental layer of protection in addition to the rune pendant which everyone guarding Azkaban had to wear to ward off the effects of Dementors. Amelia also sent some of her Aurors to the already incarcerated Death Eaters to question them under Veritaserum. Here, they hit jackpot. Under its effects, Bellatrix Lestrange told them that she was given an ornate two-handled cup for safekeeping by her master in which she had stored in the Lestrange's vault at Gringotts. Upon hearing this, she immediately dispatched Dirk Cresswell of the Goblin Liaison Office along with Croker's deputy, Broderick Bode to the bank. To say that the goblins were upset would be the understatement of the century. After finding and destroying the abomination in the Ministry Wizard's presence, they launch a bank-wide audit to discover any more such dark items, if possible. Meanwhile, she sent a letter to Harry with her elf to ask him to let his godfather know about Pettigrew's capture and that if he would appear at Hogwarts and allow himself to be interrogated under Veritaserum there, he could become a free man that day itself. Harry was ecstatic. He was going to owl Sirius, but then remembering the messenger Patronus last night and Dumbledore's instructions, he decided to try it. Everyone was awed when the stag Patronus came out and went right through the temporary classroom wall in the Great Hall. After he had sent off his Patronus, he quickly approached Professor McGonagall and informed her. He also spoke briefly with Professor Snape, who only promised that he would not start anything with Black. Soon, at lunchtime, a black dog appeared along with Professor Lupin at the entrance to the Great Hall, and Harry, screaming, "Padfoot!" soon had his arms wrapped around the dog's neck. He then sent A.M. Messenger Patronus to Madame Bones, who promptly appeared in the Great Hall with her guard and a Medawizard. She had been given a two-way portkey by the headmaster the last night. At Harry's urging, Sirius is transformed, leaving the people around in awe of him. The reaction of a certain pair of redheads though was different. They were starstruck at being in the presence of two of the marauders whom they considered their heroes. Soon, Sirius was interrogated and proven to be innocent. Harry and his friends gave a loud cheer, but the fact that the twins cheered even more loudly and were dancing together confused Sirius. Harry's friends and Remus had a knowing smile on their faces though. Then, both Sirius and Remus were brought up to speed on what had happened last night. Sirius immediately not on. Lee claimed the guardianship of his godson but also asked that the Dursleys be charged with child neglect, abuse, and endangerment. Also, he asked Amelia to charge Dumbledore with child endangerment and neglect, and Snape to be put on probation for bullying of students and showing favoritism, which he knew had resulted in the lowest potions scores since he joined as a teacher. Dumbledore still though that things could not have been as bad as Sirius thought regarding the Dursleys, and also was defensive about Snape. When he said so, Sirius pleaded with Harry to show them memories from his life at the Dursleys and of his classes with Snape too. Sirius had learned certain things from Remus, who had been the Dada teacher the previous year. Snape was already looking ashamed. Harry was reluctant to show memories related to Dursleys where others might eavesdrop. So, they once more returned to the antechamber, where Amelia quickly set up the privacy wards and unshrunk her pensieve. Snape was also asked to step in. Harry put several memories in it, and then Amelia tapped the runes. The result was not pretty. Both Snape and Dumbledore were overcome by an immense amount of shame, guilt, and shock. The former because of his treatment of his best friend's son, whom he always assumed to have lived a spoilt and pampered life, and the latter because his decisions had resulted in the boy going through hell. Remus looked like he would not need to transform to rip them both apart. Professor McGonagall seemed all set to lend him a hand as well. Amelia was also all set to agree to Sirius's wishes, NSED as she was after seeing the memories, and that was when Harry spoke. I would rather have the syllabus of Muggle studies and the conditions here improved, and the eyes of the purebloods opened Riga. RDING the Muggle world and the Muggle-born, rather than have the headmaster sent to Azkaban. Because imprisoning him would achieve nothing, instead making it harder for us to bring the changes that we want to see, because he has been known to champion Muggle-born and squib rights. Dumbledore was surprised that he was still being given a chance to atone after the life he put Harry through. What changes, Harry? Asked Sirius. Professor McGonagall told him about the discussion related to Muggle studies and related topic which had been left out earlier. Amelia was then quick to suggest putting both Dumbledore and Snape on probation, and Sirius agreed, saying that he would also take the black seat on the Board of Governors to keep an eye and the seat on the Wizengamot to help things along. Then, The promise of resuming their last night's discussions related to Muggle culture in the evening, Harry was sent off to his remaining classes. As soon as he left, and the privacy wards were re-established, Professor McGonagall coldly ripped into Snape and Dumbledore, which was far worse than being shouted at, by her. Seeing the memories and being called monsters for Snape's maliciousness towards Har. Why due to his petty schooltime grudge against James Potter, and Dumbledore's neglect in Harry's upbringing left both feeling quite hollow and questioning themselves, when had they become so abhorrent? It was now the third day. Some Muggle-born and raised children had joined Harry's group, and officially called the Muggle Studies Overhowlers. The previous day, they were given special permission after school ended to visit Muggle London under adult supervision and buy some study materials to show to the teachers. Professor Snape had been elected to chaperone them along with Auror Tonks because she was a Muggle-born parent and thus could easily blend in with the Muggle world. Professor Burbage called Professor McGonagall standing at the door to her office on the third day. The Muggle Studies professor looked up. Professor McGonagall, please come in, she said, and continued, I assume this is regarding the concerns which the children raised about my subject the day before yesterday, isn't it? Professor McGonagall sat down, took a deep breath, and nodded. We would like you to answer a few questions asked by the parents of the Muggle-born and see where you stand on your current knowledge of their world, she said. Of course, said Burbage with false confidence. When? She asked. After dinner, the headmaster, the other heads of houses, and the Muggle-born and raised children will be present here along with their parents. The children requested and were given special permission to go to London today again, this time to meet their parents, said the headmistress. Why the parents though? Asked Burbage. It seems when in London yesterday, few of the Muggle-born phoned their parents who on hearing about the happenings, wanted to refine their plans, and then the children came to me with the request. So, off we sent Severus and Tonks again this evening, said Minerva. Just then the door opened and Professor Snape came in and sat quietly staring at Professor Burbage. Snape had changed a lot since the revelations on Halloween night. He seemed more relaxed and also more friendly. Partly, it also had to do with the successful capture of Voldemort, who was still being kept under a body bind, and an enchanted sleep. He would not have to play the double role and live in fear ever again. Charity took one look at Snape and broke into laughter. Minerva too looked at Severus, but she was more restrained. One could surely see the hint of a smile though. You look like you want to both laugh and rage at the same time. Have I been that bad, Severus? Asked Charity honestly. Well, I don't know if it was your choice just to teach what's in the books and not bother to update your knowledge, or whether you were being forced by the department to impart the outdated knowledge which would only help the magically raised if they were to go back few centuries in time. Asked Severus, still staring at her curiously. I thought not much had changed in their world and so, I was content to teach from the prescribed books, said Charity sheepishly. It can't be that bad, Severus, can it? Asked a now bewildered Professor McGonagall. Worse, Minerva. Much worse. Charity just said that I was looking like I wanted to laugh and rage at the same time. Well, I and the Grangers and the Finch-Fletchleys actually did the same when the children showed us the Muggle Studies books and then we discussed things, said Snape. You will learn everything tonight, he then stated, raising one hand, stalling further questions, and the other two left it at that. Soon, the time drew nearer and the concerned parties, including the Granger and Finch-Fletchley parents who had been invited to dine with their children in the Great Hall, made their way to the Muggle Studies classroom. The parents were clearly awed by the talking paintings, the moving staircases, the ghosts, etc., and the kids had fun observing their expressions. Once everyone was settled, the interview with Professor Burbage began. As a mark of respect, it was decided that instead of the children, it would be the parents who would ask questions and the children would only contribute with explanations. Tell me, Professor Burbage, asked Emma Granger, commencing the interview. What do you know about the internet? Professor Burbage shook her head. She said, I don't know. Do you know about computers? Asked Mr. Finch-Fletchley, a rich industrialist. Charity nodded, but on asking what she knew, they learned that her knowledge was that of the computers at the beginning of their era. The parents and students then told her, as well as the assembled heads of houses and the headmaster about the computers of today and the internet, leaving them all awestruck. Snape, being a half-blood, was able to corroborate all that. The parents then went on to ask her questions about laundromats, supersonic jets, moon missions, Russian space stations, names of current Muggle PMs and presidents of various countries, microwave ovens, J.R.R. Tolkien, Albert Einstein, Mahatma Gandhi, the Cold War, nuclear bombs, Star Wars, automatic pistols, Spider-Man, submarines, cricket, tennis, pagers, video games, Olympics, and many more things. Professor Burbage was unable to answer even a single question properly, and she also expressed disbelief over the existence of some of the things or happening of certain events. That's when Justin had a brainwave. Turning to Professor Dumbledore, hesitantly, never having spoken one-on-one to him, he asked, "Sir, could you arrange a pensieve for us to show the memories of all those things which Professor Burbage doesn't believe about?" "Brilliant idea, Mr. Finch Fletchley," said Dumbledore, beaming at him. "I will go and fetch mine immediately." "Why not have an elf bring it here, sir?" asked Hermione. Dumbledore looked at her in shock and then embarrassment at not having thought that himself, while Harry and Snape, of all people, shared looks of amusement. Dumbledore noticed it, and his embarrassment deepened. "You are of course right, Miss Granger, and as Harry once quoted you. I too, like other wizards and witches, seem to lack logic or common sense," said Dumbledore, smiling. "Oh no, Professor, that wasn't my intent," cried Hermione, horrified. Laughing, Dumbledore said, "I know that, my child, and I merely commented that I indeed acted without using logic. I will have an elf bring it now. And yes, one more thing. 10 points to both you and Mr. Finch Fletchley each." Soon, they began viewing the pensieve memories. The parents were awed by what was certainly, in their words, an advanced holographic projector, but they were disappointed because Muggles could not use it. The magically raised people in the room were blown away by what they saw in the memories. Even Snape didn't know some of the things. The interview soon began to wind down, and then, at Harry's request, the Muggle parents told the teachers about the curriculum at the non-magical schools and asked about the lack of subjects at Hogwarts like maths, geography, economics, languages, phys ed classes. No other physical sport apart from Quidditch, educational field trips, lack of competitions like elocution, debate, general knowledge quiz, chess, etc. Again, he pensieve was used to show examples of what was mentioned. In the end, it was decided that the headmaster and the heads of houses along with Professor Burbage would show the memory of the interview to the education department along with the memories that the Muggle-born and raised students had contributed. The next day, true to their word, they visited the ministry, canceling some of the classes and putting other teachers in charge. The Board of Governors were also called for an emergency meeting with them in the offices of the education department. Somehow, Croaker also learned of this, and he, along with a few unspeakables of his, invited himself along. Also present were the head Obliviator and Arthur Weasley and Perkins of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office. The skepticism of the board and the head Obliviator on the first broaching of the topic first turned to amazement at the wonders of the mundane world, then to horror on learning about the modern weapons, and more so, on learning about the CCTV cameras which were being installed almost everywhere and to which the Obliviators were oblivious of. After a long moment, where no one uttered a word, Croaker quietly spoke up. "The Muggles already know about the Obliviators due to our ministry's underestimation and ignorance of the CCTV cameras. That is why many of their surveillance teams are nowadays staffed with people who know about the magical world. This has also unfortunately given rise to secret groups of people who have Dursley-like or a more medieval attitude towards wizards or witches, or are simply envious of the power we wield." This shook the rest. Madame Griselda Marchbanks, the head of the Wizarding Examinations Committee, spoke up for the first time. She was the oldest of the lot and everyone respected her words. Glaring at the Board of Governors, she said, "Magic haters aside, a part of our committee has been keeping tabs on the number of Muggle-born and half-bloods leaving either the magical world and returning to Muggle world, or leaving these shores altogether and going to countries like America, France, Canada, or India where they have laws against discrimination. Imagine this. Many of our most talented Arts and witches contributing to the progress of other nations, all because you people think that only purebloods should be in the important places whether they have the skills to handle the position or not. All the governors hung their heads in shame. It was Dumbledore who spoke next. The time is for us to decide that knowing the truth about the mundane world now, can we afford to continue with the current syllabus which is 50 if not 100 years out of date? Madam Bones, who also sat on the board of governors, got up. Absolutely not. It's also time to stop calling them muggles, which is such a derogatory term for people who are actually advanced in many fields. It's better to, like Albus, call them mundanes or non-magicals. Also, there's the fact that they outnumber us in population by a vast number. She also suggested creating a simulation with the help of the Muggle-borns. It would be for those who frequented the mundane world like Obliviators, members of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, Aurors, Hit Wizards, etc. This would teach them how to blend in with the mundane world easily and identify and avoid charm the CCTV cameras not to capture them in their act of obliviation. One of the other unspeakables also told them how the Americans considered it a crucial life skill to be able to blend into the non-magical world and not only had non-magical studies as a compulsory subject for everyone at their schools but also had the normal subjects and activities which the mundanes offered as mentioned in the memory by the parents. This way, if a wizard or witch wished to pursue higher studies in the mundane world, they could easily do so. They also have wizarding colleges or universities as part of the non-magical ones but hidden from mundane sight offering higher magical studies. The British magical world only has apprenticeships whereto the students are subject to prejudice based on blood status. Not many mundane-born could hope to be taken in on as apprentices here no matter how intelligent they were. The British too needed to have an education system like that of the Americans. All the ideas including this got approval. Now, they only had to sell it to the Wizengamot where the main battle lay. It did help that they had many Wizengamot members amongst them and few others could be counted on to provide support, plus they had the pensieve memories to aid them. It also helped that some Death Eaters who had been a part of Wizengamot were now incarcerated in a newly warded wing of Azkaban awaiting proper public trial. There was still a long way to go to modernize the British magical world, but a part of the battle had at least been won. Ever since Professor Dumbledore saw the memories of Harry's life with the Dursleys, he was racked with an immense amount of guilt at how much Harry had suffered there, all because of his decisions, and regret at having ignored Minerva's warnings that night about the Dursleys being the worst sort of muggles. So, he had been trying to find a solution to get Harry out of the tournament as a beginning of his penance. The champions had not been given instructions about the first task because of this very reason. Also, there was the fact that after the arrest of Crouch Sr., they were in the process of appointing a new head for the Department of International Magical Cooperation, a compulsory member of the judges' panel for the tasks. Dumbledore decided to use common sense and logic as the mundane born and raised had so easily used to bring simple solutions to complex and dangerous problems these last few days. Single quote. Referring to the Muggle born and raised as mundane born and raised doesn't feel right even if it's not demeaning like the previous term, thought Dumbledore. Better to call them normal born and raised instead. Need to raise this with Amelia and others during the next meet. Back to the problem at hand. Remembering the chits which bore the names of the champions, Dumbledore went to his magical safe and pulled those out. Casting a magical signature detection charm on each piece of parchment, he found what he was looking for. Except for Harry's chit, the rest of the chits had traces of the magical signatures of the champions. Harry's contained that of the one who had put the chit in the first place, Barty Crouch Jr. This meant that Crouch Jr. instead could be forced to take part in the tasks. While he didn't like forcing someone to do something against their will, he consoled himself with the thought that he was only punishing the one who actually deserved it, and besides, he owed Harry for all the suffering he had gone through. With this thought, he flowed to the ministry and met Amelia. Fortunately, she was free and listened to both his ideas. She then sent word to Croaker to discuss Dumbledore's Crouch idea. Croaker sent his deputy, Broderick Bode, as he was busy, and so, Dumbledore, Amelia, and Bode put their heads together to discuss the pros and cons of forcing Crouch Jr. to participate. The fear of losing magic would surely make Crouch Jr. participate, but the second task could be problematic as it involved the use of a person as a hostage. This would be someone whom the champion would miss the most. Whom would Crouch miss the most then? You see, whoever this person was, would be magically transported to Hogwarts regardless of where the person was, no anti-apparition or Portkey ward could stop the goblet's ancient magic from bringing them there. Amelia immediately said that it would be his master, while Bode took some time as he was studying Junior's old file, and stated that Rabaston, who had been rumored to be Junior's lover, was also a possibility. While Voldemort being under an enchanted sleep would not be a problem, as the goblet's magic would not wake him from sleep on transporting, and they were certain of that. Rabaston, though, could pose a real problem. Who knows how unbalanced he had become since his incarceration in the maximum security wing of Azkaban. It was Dumbledore who suggested that before the second task, Rabaston also be put under the same enchanted sleep and be chained in magic restraining manacles as Voldemort was. Heaving a sigh of relief, knowing that with that bit taken care of, Junior could be easily monitored throughout the 3 tasks and appropriate steps taken to keep the audience safe, they moved on to other important topics like the vote of no confidence against Cornelius and the public trial under Veritaserum of the pardoned Death Eaters. The newspapers had already been informed about the capture of Pettigrew and the innocence of Sirius Black. Just then Croaker arrived and Bode took his leave. Croaker wanted to have the vote called first and the trials to be conducted later because he wanted to have the Horcrux dealt with first and then have Harry's scar operated upon. After that only, he wanted to hold a public trial of Voldemort with his magic bound like an expelled student. This way, Voldemort would not be able to escape or use magic to cause harm. He too would go under a Veritaserum trial and then be tossed through the veil. The question was how to find the Horcruxes. It was Amelia who got the brainwave. Both Dumbledore and Croaker had been making plans to backtrack through Voldemort's life and trying to find likely places, and had voiced such opinions to Amelia. Smirking at both of them, she said, "My dear sirs, have you thought of feeding Veritaserum to Voldemort and getting all the details from him?" That shocked both men and had them blushing at the answer which had been in front of them all this time. Since going through her experience in the Great Hall, Amelia too had begun to try to apply logic and common sense to all her problems rather than trying to find a magical solution for every case. Getting over his embarrassment, Croaker immediately jumped up, and then flowed to his office in the Department of Mysteries, where he immediately set his juniors to prepare for Voldemort's questioning. Still bound in magic restraining chains, they soon had him spilling the locations and security surrounding each Horcrux. Teams were then sent to Hogwarts, Room of Requirement, the Gaunt Shack, and the Cave with the Lake. The Hogwarts team was quick to locate the diadem and the Gaunt ring in their respective places. In the case of the cave, they found a different locket with a note from someone called Rab. The snake had already been dealt with after learning from Voldemort that it too was a Horcrux. It was simply tossed through the veil while still being under a body-bind curse. They had not been able to put it under the enchanted sleep because of it being a Horcrux. The diadem and the Gaunt ring, on being brought in, were dealt with the way the goblins had. A drop of phoenix tears on each artifact, like in the case of the cup, and each emitted black smoke indicating the destruction of the soul pieces. So, that was another Founder's artifact and one family heirloom they had managed to keep intact while getting rid of the embedded darkness. The unspeakables mulled over who could Rab be and went through the list of Death Eaters caught, killed, escaped, and even the ones suspected of being Death Eaters. After an hour, one of the new recruits, a normal born, as they had all begun to call them on Croaker's insistence after Dumbledore's suggestion, found one Regulus Arcturus Black. Croaker immediately sent a Patronus message to Sirius requesting a meeting. Sirius, who was in the process of going through the names of wizarding renovators, replied back saying that he would be there in an hour. After finding a suitable company, and sending them an owl for a meeting at the Leaky Cauldron that evening, he went to the ministry. Upon finding what the unspeakables had been up to and learning the truth about his brother and recognizing the locket as belonging to him, he called the only person who could have some answers, his house elf, Creature. The elf had always been devoted to Regulus. Creature called Sirius. Crack. There was a sound like a gunshot and a foul-looking house elf appeared, looking at him with hateful eyes. "Nasty master," called Creature. He asked, bowing till his big ears touched the floor. looking at it with equally hateful eyes, as the elf had always mistreated and abused him on his mother's orders when he was young. He dangled the locket in front of him and watched as Creature's eyes widened and they started watering. "Tell me, Creature, did Regulus bring home a locket before he died?" asked Sirius. Creature suddenly began to beat his hands and feet on the floor while crying. Creature tried. He tried to fulfill Master Regulus' last orders to destroy the locket, but he could not. Creature failed. Bad Creature, bad Creature. Sirius, horrified, grabbed him to stop him from punishing himself and asked kindly this time, "Creature, we can destroy it. I will even show you how to destroy it so that you can fulfill Regulus' order. There are other dark objects like it, which the unspeakables have dealt with. Please bring me the one which Regulus gave you to destroy." He now truly appreciated Creature's devotion to his brother. Creature looked at him, hardly believing what he was hearing. "Can Nasty Master really do so? He isn't lying?" he asked. "I swear on my magic, Creature, that I am saying the truth," said Sirius solemnly, and here was a flash of light showing that he wasn't lying. Creature snapped his fingers and there was a locket in his hand having a serpentine S and emeralds embedded in it. Croaker then brought out a vial of phoenix tears and a dropper. Giving the things to him, he instructed him to put one drop near the hinges. They had known that opening the hinge would require Harry's help with Parseltongue, but it was fraught with dangers. The teardrop, being a liquid, could easily make its way inside and destroy the Horcrux. The room they had been meeting in was chosen with risks in mind, as it had protective enchantments. As soon as Creature poured one drop, the locket sprung open, and just as the piece of Voldemort's soul came out and tried to possess one of the inhabitants, Creature poured another drop on the now open locket, and that bit of Voldemort's soul emitted a scream, and black smoke came out of the locket, and then everything went silent. Cheers erupted as they had now destroyed all the Horcruxes, and once Harry was operated upon to remove the scar, Voldemort would be mortal again. Sirius gave Regulus' locket to Creature, saying that his brother would have been proud of him and would want him to have the locket. That day, Sirius gained a loyal and devoted house elf. While others were busy with the Horcrux hunt or updating the Hogwarts curriculum, Hermione, with Harry's help, wrote a letter to her parents to ask them about grafting, as it had completely slipped her mind. She also suggested that with Dumbledore's permission, they visit Hogwarts to discuss this with Madame Pomfrey and Br. Ing some relevant medical paraphernalia to explain things better. She would in the meanwhile, with Professor McGonagall's help, try to find which of the other non-magical parents of the present and past students were doctors. Harry suggested that on getting permission, Sirius could apparate them to Hogsmeade. It would be a better chance for Sirius to get properly acquainted with them. Harry and Hermione then waited for mealtime, and just as it was finished, asked to speak with the headmaster and the heads of houses in the antechamber. There, they both told them that they had asked Hermione's parents for advice regarding Harry's scar and requested the headmaster's permission to have Sirius bring them here this time. They were given permission, but while exiting the antechamber, a thought came to Harry's mind and he asked, "Why does Hogwarts neither have a parent-teachers association, called PTA in short, nor hold parent-teachers meetings periodically to discuss the progress of the children? Are any suggestions for improvements and grievances? Such a thing has never been thought of, Mr. Potter," said Professor McGonagall, then added, "I assume it's a practice in the non-magical schools." "Yes, ma'am," said Harry, while Hermione glanced once at Professor Snape. Snape noticed the look Hermione was giving him and asked her. She said, "No offense, Professor Snape, but if such an association had been in place and such meetings had been held regularly at Hogwarts, then you would have been sacked from Hogwarts ages ago or put on probation until you changed your attitude and teaching methods. Your EXCU say of being a spy for the light would not have protected you at all." Professor Snape chuckled at her blunt statement, which still took Hermione aback. "What, Miss Granger, can't I chuckle? I know that I am the dungeon bat of Slytherin, but I am human too, and with the things which have happened in the last few days, I now have the chance to act more human. All thanks to you, and Harry and all your cohorts setting things in motion," said Professor Snape. "Anyway, this suggestion of yours is another thing to add to the number of changes we are already trying to bring about," interjected Professor Sprout, smiling. As planned, Sirius was roped in to bring the Granger parents to Hogwarts. He was also asked whether he would like to take on the role of Dada Professor once the curse on the position was dealt with. You see, Sirius had been an Auror along with Harry's father during Voldemort's reign of terror. He immediately agreed as it would also give him the chance to spend time with his godson. Professor Snape did not comment on that. While they were organizing this, Ron and Susan approached Professor McGonagall to discuss the curse on the Dada position. She soon sent an owl to Bill Weasley, who worked as a curse breaker for Gringotts. She wanted to have a Gringotts team go over the Dada classroom and office and remove the curse. Soon, she received an official Gringotts owl with an estimate of the fees that would be incurred. Considering the risks as the curse was placed by the Dark Lord, it was 3,500 galleons. After learning this, she called all the kids who were part of the Muggle Studies Overhowlers and told them about it, as Hogwarts did not have the necessary funds. Professor McGonagall soon had to postpone the talk for the day though due to the classes. In the evening, she continued the meeting. YCH now also included the headmaster and the other heads of houses. The school club had in the meanwhile expanded to include the magically raised too, as Susan had raised an insightful point. Just as the magically raised need to know that the non-magical people are way ahead of us with their advancements and we need to learn to blend with them, the non-magically raised also need to learn our customs and traditions to blend in with us, so that they would be easily accepted by their magically raised peers into their midst and also not come off looking like upstarts. The normally raised try to fit their idea of the magical world into the normal world, and while the magically raised don't do vice versa, they do scoff at the normally raised, as the magically raised people have a superiority complex because of having magic. We need to bring the useful and positive ideas and values of both worlds together to stop the rise of any more Voldemorts or Grindelwalds. This resulted in the group being rechristened as Magico Normal Studies Club. Excellent, Miss Bones, 20 points to Hufflepuff. Professor Flitwick had said, the staff sponsor for the now official school club, when he heard this, before continuing. I admit to have not thought about that part of the equation. The normally raised need to learn our culture just as we need to learn theirs. Pretty soon, the discussion on the fees quo TED by Gringotts led to the kids suggesting that they owl their parents. That resulted in the next day's impromptu parent-teachers meeting related to just those children who were in the group. This owl so gave the teachers a small taste of what a parent-teachers meeting felt like. The parents, especially the non-magical ones, had a lot of queries about their children's progress and also suggestions and grievances regarding Snape, Filch, Binns, the lack of physical education classes or outdoor sports, and so on. Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Snape received the worst of the rebuke, especially Dumbledore, or for his inaction in bringing changes. Snape had already come clean about his behavior and repeated his promise to turn over a new leaf. Soon, Hogwarts received the donation, the lion's share of W.H. Ick, to the surprise of the magical parents, was covered by the non-magical parents. This was another thing for the wizards and witches to wonder about, seeing that some of the non-magical parents were a hell of a lot richer than the magical ones. The meeting also gave the Granger parents the chance to discuss Harry's scar with Madame Pomfrey. Professor McGonagall, who had in the meanwhile made a list of the medical professionals who were parents of current or former normal-born students, shared the list with them. On seeing the list, the Granger parents were quick to zero in on a plastic surgeon who was the father of a former student. With the Grangers' help, Professor McGonagall drafted a letter to Dr. Savant, whose daughter had graduated a few years ago from Hogwarts, and upon observing the bigotry and prejudice in the hiring practices here, had moved to Makusa to pursue higher studies and better career, as there, she would not face such problems, and moreover, everyone was knowledgeable about the normal world. Professor McGonagall and the Grangers would take the letter personally to Dr. Savant after the Grangers got an appointment on phone. Now, back to the matter of the Dada curse. In 2 days' time, a team of goblin and wizard curse breakers led by Bill Weasley and Griphook arrived at Hogwarts and immediately set to work. Harry, who remembered Griphook from his very first visit to Gringotts, greeted him warmly when he saw him in the entrance hall and introduced his friends before going to his classes. It pleased the visiting goblins that a wizard remembered one of their own, and that too, very fondly. Professor Babbling The rune's mistress joined the team on the floor containing the Dada office and classroom to observe their work, as she knew that Voldemort must have used runes to anchor the curse. She was surprised to find Professor Snape there, too. She looked at him with a raised eyebrow and he said, "Even if I don't have a runes mastery, I did take runes at school and received an outstanding in L's and Newts. Also, since the Dark Lord's first downfall, I did a further study of runes, as the Dark Mark is similarly anchored. I wanted to remove it." Parseltongue obstacle? She asked, guessing accurately why he had not been successful and now feeling more at ease with him, especially as this was not the unpleasant Snape of old. "How do you, of course, you are a Ravenclaw. UW. Old not say anything before thinking things through," said Snape smiling. "And don't you forget that, Severus," said Bathsheba smirking. The smile grew on his face on hearing that, especially as she had for the first time used his first name rather than calling him Snape with distaste as she used to do in the past. "Oh, what a nice smile, and looking very handsome too. Where did that thought come from?" thought Bathsheba while trying to hide her blush. There was a yelp that drew their attention to the curse-breaking team. Gringotts was right, after all, in thinking that Riddle would not make it easy to find or lift the curse. It seemed that Voldemort had built some defenses into it if anyone but him ever tried to lift it. Two huge, green serpents in the likeness of the Slytherin emblem dematerialized out of nowhere to attack them. They seemed to be able to withstand curses being fired at them. Adding to that, they were devilishly fast. Everyone within the classroom scattered in different directions but did not go outside. Bill wisely locked it up to keep the snakes from escaping, but the snakes were too intent on harming those within the room. Not even the dark curses which Snape fired seemed to be hurting them even one bit. One of those snakes came face to face with Bathsheba. She had situated herself on top of a desk like most of the people there. The snake rose at her eye level, unaffected by the increasingly dangerous curses being fired at it by Snape and half the team. Even the handheld weapons of the goblins only glanced off it. The snake hissed at those who ally attacked it, and a small cloud of poisonous gas sprayed out of its mouth and into the faces of the goblins who had attacked it physically, making them dive out of the way and hurry to apply their version of a bubblehead charm. Returning its attention to Bathsheba, it leaned back and was just about to lunge at her neck. Left with no option, Snape fired the killing curse in the nick of time. The snake dropped dead like a puppet, with its strings cut off. Seeing this, one of the goblins fired their own variety of a killing curse at the remaining snake and finished it off. Snape approached Bathsheba to check up on her and suddenly found his arms full of a sobbing, relieved woman. Snape's arms went around her automatically and he sat down on the bench with his arms still around her, not knowing what else to do. He had never had to console a woman in years. So, he settled for just holding her gently while passively observing the team which had resumed their work. He took a deep breath and inhaled the very pleasant scent of her shampoo. "I wish I could keep smelling it forever, what am I thinking?" thought Snape, blushing. Bill, who was looking in their direction at that time, saw reddening of his cheeks and shot him a knowing smirk. Snape half-heartedly sneered at his former student, which made Bill smirk even more. The Grangers took a Saturday appointment to visit Dr. Savon. As previously discussed, Professor McGonagall and Madame Pomfrey arrived at the Granger residence in the morning. They had come in separately as Madame Pomfrey was slightly delayed in the infirmary. Pomfrey was wearing her idea of Muggle wear, but Mrs. Granger was quick to take her and Professor McGonagall into her bedroom as her husband was trying to hold in his laughter because what she was wearing would have been in fashion 50 years ago. While Professor McGonagall was still better dressed than Madame Pomfrey, her attire too was a bit outdated. Once the three ladies had disappeared into the master bedroom, Mr. Granger roared with laughter. "What does Granger find so funny?" asked Professor McGonagall in a huff. "You're out of fashion non-magical attire, especially that of Madame Pomfrey," said Mrs. Granger, trying to suppress a grin. "What? This is as per the Muggle studies books," Madame Pomfrey began, then stopped and pinched her nose and then continued, "Of course, those bloody books are outdated." "Sorry. What, according to you, would be the right clothes, then?" asked Professor McGonagall looking between the two. "Wait a sec," said Mrs. Granger, who opened her walk-in closet and a few Anutes later came out with 2 pantsuits. These should fit you. The second one belongs to Dan's sister. He won't mind you temporarily borrowing it, she said. But these look like men's wear, exclaimed Professor McGonagall. No. Office-going women wear them, said Mrs. Granger and showed them some of her magazines. Okay, then. Thank you and please call me Minerva from now on, Mrs. Granger, said Professor McGonagall gratefully after seeing the cover photo of a similarly dressed woman. Call me, Poppy, said Madame Pomfrey just as easily, still perusing one of the magazines. Okay, Minerva and Poppy, then call me Emma. Now get changed. I will wait outside, said Mrs. Granger. Oh yes, sorry, said Poppy embarrassed at getting sidetracked, and quickly put down the magazine. Mrs. Granger then went out and tried to give Dan a chiding look, but failed and ended up chuckling along with him. The 2 witches soon came out. Considering that wizards and witches aged slowly, both Minerva and Poppy still ought to be in their early 40s and the muggle attire suited them well. Once they changed, the party went out to the garage and was soon on the way to the hospital where Savon worked during the day. Even a small trip such as this was an eye-opener for Madame Pomfrey, who spent most of her time either at Hogwarts during the academic year or at home, or at St. Mungo's during holidays. 15 minutes after reaching the hospital, they were shown into his cabin. An unassuming man, at first look, Savon hid a resourceful mind which they would learn of today. What brings you superior magical types to a muggle hospital? Asked Savon, emphasizing the word, muggle, in a derogatory way while trying to sound like a pureblood ponce and then laughing at his own joke. I see you have not lost your sense of humor, Savon, said a smiling Minerva, snorting at his attempt while remembering the affable man from her visit to his home more than 20 years ago. Then, getting serious, she introduced the other 2 and came quickly to the point. Madame Pomfrey then took over explaining the things with the aid of Emma and Dan while presenting the papers to him, which he began to keenly read. I have just one worry, Savon and Professor McGonagall, said Dr. Daniel Granger. One moment, and call me Sam, everyone here does, said Dr. Savon absent-mindedly while going through the papers while Professor McGonagall shot Dan Granger a glance. Sure, Sam, and call me Dan, said Mr. Granger smiling. Okay, tell me now, Dan, and just for your info, I have the subscription to the magical papers. So, I know about the recent happenings in that world, said Sam, finally looking up. As you know that a piece of Voldemort's soul is attached to that scar of his. What if, while operating upon him, it fights back? We cannot have non-magical nurses or attendants present in the operating room. I am worried about the statute as well as a risk to their lives, said Dan. You are right about the first, wrong about the second, said Dr. Savon with a look that said, I know something you don't. Now don't go holding off on us, Sam, spit it out, said Minerva. Let me give you the show. RT answer first then, my own team is staffed with squib and muggle-born doctors and nurses, said Dr. Savon, and then leaned back to enjoy the look of shock on the witches' faces while the Grangers were pleasantly surprised. How? Muggle-borns? Why would they want to work in the muggle world when they have magic? Asked Professor McGonagall, still reeling. Before Savon could reply, Mrs. Granger interjected, you are asking this. Minerva, knowing that no normal-born would easily get a job they deserve and any squib would only get a menial job barely enough to scrape a living in this bigoted world of yours. Haven't we been discussing these very things in the past few days? She was looking at her in disbelief. Professor McGonagall looked down ashamed. You are still trying to imagine they are a part of a utopian world, Minerva. In spite of knowing the truth. Get your head out of it, said Daniel Granger a bit sternly. Clearing his throat to draw their attention, Savon spoke up. After my daughter became a part of your world, I spent time cultivating contacts through her, getting to know other parents like me, and also learning more about your world. The things that we came to know disgusted us, said Dr. Savon with his feelings evident on his face. Yes, well, it's on the way to being rectified, said Minerva, still feeling embarrassed. Dr. Savon hummed with the expression that said, I will see it when I believe it. But what bearing does it have here? Asked Poppy. I am getting there, said Dr. Savant, gesturing for patience. When I came to know about the squibs for the first time, I got in touch with one, and through him, others, not only adults but children who had been deliberately left on the streets to die by families who didn't want the public shame of giving birth to squibs, he continued. Horrifying the Grangers about the dark side of the magical world her own daughter was now a part of. I and some of the non-magical parents like me formed a charitable group of sorts. Pooled our resources, and put those unfortunate kids in normal schools. We also ensured our own children's Muggle education during the summers. The squib adults were taught things that we grew up knowing about. Then, the kids on returning from school would teach these adults all that they learned at school. These kids and even the adults went on to become doctors, teachers, scientists, engineers, etc. And are living decent, respectable lives now and have families. We later also had some Muggle-borns joining them in their education as they came to the same realization that my daughter did about the discrimination in your world. It's few of these people who are currently working with me in this very hospital as doctors and nurses, said Dr. Savant to his listeners. Not only that, the receptionist who took your appointment is a squib. She belongs to the House of Naught, you know. Her name is Sylvia. Her family, at first, kept her under lock and key for nearly 15 years because apart from being a squib, she was born with some health problems which were magically incurable, but later they seemed to have decided to dump her in the normal world to get rid of her. She was CKED up by the police while wandering the Manchester streets at night, and luckily one cop there had a son at Hogwarts. What she was talking about was nonsensical for those not in the know, but he understood. He was also in touch with our group and brought her to our attention. We had a cure for what you magical people didn't, and once she was healed completely, we set her up to be educated in our world. She is here only part-time aiding me as she completes her in food technology and hopes to be placed in one of the global flavor houses like Gavatin or Dolar, said Dr. Savant, impressing them with the level of involvement and benevolence of his group towards the neglected members of the magical community. Anyway, back to the topic, said he, suddenly turning all business and consulting his diary. Can you bring Mr. Potter on Tuesday at 11 a.m.? The entire procedure should take less time than usual because instead of anesthesia, I believe Madame Pomfrey here can stun him. We have a spell called the Morpheus Charm, which is a gentle way of putting a patient to sleep which healers use, said Poppy. Better, said Sam, lifting the papers related to Harry's scar. Can I make a copy of these for my study? I assure you, I won't leave it lying around. Daniel Granger nodded. Emma grinned and said, here's another impromptu non-magical studies lesson. Sam went to the printer cum Xerox machine in the corner connected to his computer and soon had copies. Dr. Savant then showed them to the two witches, astounding them. It was hilarious how they continued to be surprised by the littlest things which the non-magical people used in their everyday life. The two colleagues then returned to Hogwarts while Emma and Dan stayed back, claiming that they wanted to discuss things further. They secretly wanted to get involved with Sam's group but didn't want to say so in front of the two witches. Professor McGonagall called a meeting of Harry and Hermione and all the adults who were involved in relevant discussions and informed them about their meeting and the schedule. She later also held a meeting of the headmaster, the heads of houses, the board of governors, and some key ministry department heads like Madame Griselda Marchbanks, Madame Bones, and a few others to tell them about Dr. Savant's group. Madame Marchbanks then pulled out the scorecard of the last few years which she had arranged by blood status and showed how the half-bloods and normal-borns were turning out to be the best performers in school. Hearing about it, how much the ministry had failed the squibs and normal-borns, and how much drive Savant and his group had done for these people was an eye-opener for them all. The ministry clearly had a lot more work to do, considering that due to their own bigotry, they were losing out the best minds to either the non-magical world or to other countries with favorable working conditions. Soon, the day of the operation arrived. Harry was of course nervous. He was accompanied by Sirius, Hermione, Professor McGonagall, Madame Pomfrey, and the headmaster, and Croaker too. Professor Dumbledore and the head unspeakable wanted to be present in the operation chamber in case of an attack by the sole remnant of Voldemort. Most of the group had thankfully first portkeyed to the Granger home. Professor Dumbledore's attire, like Madame Pomfrey, was 50 years out of fashion, and he was temporarily given a change of modern clothes. After that, Hermione's father, Dan Granger, had fun taking him shopping after Dumbledore ensured that there was a glamour charm to make his very long hair and beard look short. To go to the hospital, they took cabs this time due to the number of people present. Sirius had brought his motorcycle though. He got it back from Hagrid, who had taken good care of it in his absence. Harry would ride with him and they would follow the cabs to the hospital. Soon, they were in the hospital and everyone assembled in one of the meeting rooms of the hospital with Dr. Savant's team. Some of the older normal-borns remembered Sirius and James from their school days and were happy to meet both Sirius and his famous godson. The headmaster and his deputy were miffed by the lack of similar warmth in their greetings by them. Dr. Savant explained the procedure to the wizards and witches with an educational video of a past operation, and then once they understood everything, EY were all led to the operation room with Sirius, Hermione and Professor McGonagall being asked to stay outside. Outside the chamber, Sirius cast a muggle-repelling charm around them and a silencing ward. The operation began after Madame Pomfrey cast the Morpheus charm on Harry, but when Dr. Savant touched his scalpel to the scar, the soul piece tried to fully possess Harry and attack him. Harry's pupils had turned red. The assisting doctors with Croaker and Dumbledore's help had to restrain him. As soon as the scar was excised, a cloud of black smoke came out of it in the form of Voldemort's head, letting out a piercing scream which was abruptly cut off, the mystery of which they learned later. While Harry was recovering in a private ward, the headmaster informed him what happened while he was magically sedated, and then Harry told him haltingly that just when he felt excruciating pain, he thought about dying and became happy with the thought of finally reuniting with his parents. That had the headmaster unusually smiling, and when others looked at him in confusion, disgust, or anger, he said, "Riddle and Harry are polar opposites. Riddle, so full of hate and fear of dying, could not stay in touch with someone so full of love and who did not fear death, which is why, when those thoughts passed through Harry's mind, it finished him off." Croaker interjected, "Now that all other pieces of Voldemort have been dealt with, we can finally send his main fragment through the veil." Then turning to Dumbledore and looking at him meaningfully, he said, "I assume you want Harry to do the hunt Ors himself when he feels up to it, but we cannot delay it by much even if he is detained in our most secure facility." By unspoken decision, they had not mentioned the prophecy to anybody because they did not want Harry to be burdened by it, especially with how well things were in hand. Yes, that would be better. The sooner done, the quicker we can begin to bring about positive changes in our world. I would like Severus to be present when Harry sends Riddle through the veil so that I can look at his dark mark after and verify that it is over. Until that dark mark exists, the Death Eaters and unmarked supporters will hold on to the hope that Voldemort will return one day, and they will try to stop us at every turn to keep the conditions supportive of Voldemort's return. The vanishing of the dark mark will be a colossal blow to their morale. They all agreed and called it a day, relieved that the end was in sight. Events happened quickly after the excising of Harry's scar. Harry, Sirius, and Dumbledore visited the Department of Mysteries. Croaker met them in the atrium and told them while en route that Voldemort's soul had been imprisoned in the homunculus by the unspeakables through the use of runes painted on his body so that he would not be able to escape. Once there, he gave the order to awaken Voldemort so that he could witness his own death at the hands of the boy who lived. Voldemort slowly opened his eyes and saw that he was still stuck to the homunculus he was possessing. He also discovered that he could neither expel himself from the body nor move. When he looked around, he saw he was surrounded by Harry Potter, Albus Dumbledore, Sirius Black, and some hooded people who were unmistakably unspeakables. That's when his eyes fell upon an ancient and crumbling raised stone dais on which hung a black curtain or veil which was fluttering as if it had just been touched. He had a feeling as if he was being watched by something on the other side. It frightened him. Suddenly, his eyes widened with realization and more fear as he understood exactly what it was and what his own presence in this chamber meant. He had read about the Veil of Death in an ancient tome. During the old times, it was the means for capital punishment. All his planning with Horcruxes had never taken the feared veil into consideration. If his soul was sent through it, then only a Horcrux d. Reigning someone would be able to regain corporeal form, but it would not have his current memories. He had planned on his reborn Horcrux locating his main soul piece through a spell created for such purposes and the two souls merging. That would not be the case if he himself was sent on the next great adventure as the Muggle-loving fool, Dumbledore called it. "Hello, Riddle," said Harry. Voldemort cursed Malfoy, who, according to Wormtail, was responsible for the loss of his diary. How else could the Potter brat know his birth name? Croaker spoke. "I have observed you looking at the veil. Yes, Hat is what it is, and that is what awaits you. Now, before you begin with your monologue, which every megalomaniac seems to be fond of, let me tell you that all the artifacts containing your soul peak, with the exception of the diary, have been cleansed of your taint. The diary, as I am sure Pettigrew has already informed you about, was destroyed 2 years ago by Mr. Potter, but I would not have cleansed it anyway as it's not an heirloom. Unlike the others, I would have simply destroyed it." He was observing every twitch, every micro-expression of Voldemort. His words only served to increase volume. Demort's fears and only the facial expressions showed he was frantically trying to either move or expel his soul from the body to escape, but could not. Voldemort had not uttered a word yet, even if he could. He seemed to not have realized that with the renervation, they had given him back the use of his vocal cords. "Are you done with enlightening him, Croaker? Have Harry send Tom on his way and we can get out of this dreary place," said Dumbledore. Croaker looked at him. Dumbledore was looking with a bit of sorrow in his eyes as he glanced at Riddle now and then, and Croaker knew that Dumbledore, as a teacher, was thinking about how a brilliant student with a promising future had gone dark and turned into this abomination. Croaker too believed that if Riddle had been guided toward the light, he could have very well become the next Dumbledore in the future. He could have been the next leader of the light if he had utilized his brilliance in a positive way. Harry and Sirius looked at Dumbledore's face and then at each other. They too seemed to have understood at least some part of what was going through the headmaster's mind. Looking at Croaker, who nodded, Harry levitated the homunculus, which found its voice at last and started screaming in terror. Its screams were abruptly cut off as he sent it through the veil. Sirius let out a breath that he didn't know he was holding. "Come on, Prongslet. Let's go to Fortescue's. Treats on me," he said, slapping his godson in the back, trying to lighten the mood. Turning to Dumbledore, he asked curtly, "You don't mind, Headmaster?" "No, Sirius. And I hope you will one day forgive this old man for the injustice you faced and the abuse Harry has suffered," said Dumbledore sadly. He had observed that Sirius was still somewhat cold toward him. It showed that he had not forgiven him. Sirius merely nodded. He had taken the seat on the Wizengamot as soon as he was declared innocent, and in his capacity as Lord Black, along with Amelia Duran. The past few days had brought the ugly truth about the Death Eaters in the Wizengamot through the use of pensive memories. All the arrested Death Eaters had been put to trial and sentenced to the warded wings of Azkaban with their magic bound. All except for Barty Crouch Jr.'s magic, that is. They had in the beginning decided to keep Crouch Jr. closer to the school and have him participate in Harry's place, but then decided that the Goblet's taking of his magic for non-performance in the tasks would be punishment enough. Also, as Crouch Jr. was no longer young, it could also result in his death due to the forced stripping of his magic by the Goblet as punishment for non-attendance. Thus, he too was sentenced to Azkaban. An Auror was dispatched to Azkaban on the day of the first task. He was asked to choose a dragon model. Also present with him was a healer, as they knew what would happen. The dragon was a Welsh green numbered 3. Then, the instructions for the task were conveyed through a magical two-way mirror that Sirius had lent them. Once it was Crouch Jr.'s turn at entering the arena. Seeing his lack of attendance, the Goblet of Fire flared with an angry red color once. And Crouch Jr. fell writhing to the floor and a few minutes later, went silent. A magical scan by the healer showed that Jr. was dead. It was calmly conveyed to the judges and later announced to the audience, thereby proving once again that Harry had not put his name in the goblet. In another session, the now Lord Black and Madame Amelia Bones, with the help of the Board of Governors and the Department of Education, had gone on to present the proof of advancements of the non-magical world and the bitter truth about what their community's bigotry towards the children born to non-magical parents and towards squibs was costing them. There were, of course, some hardliners who were leery of both ideas. Another set of pensive memories put paid to that, especially as the governors and members of the education department were visible in those, many of those being purebloods from the traditionalist faction themselves. A series of field trips had been organized by Sirius for the governors and members of the Department of Education after changing into mundane attire at the Finch-Fletchley Manor where they first had breakfast. It was quite an eye-opener for them all. At that particular Wizengamot session, Sirius had also cleverly brought up the topic of investments in the mundane world through Gringotts and bringing new magical improvements through the existing modern Muggle ideas. He had, of course, discussed the investment idea with Ragnarok, the overlord of Gringotts, beforehand. All their ideas surprisingly gained approval. The only remaining problem now was dealt with, Voldemort, and was announced at another emergency Wizengamot session. 3 Wizengamot sessions in a month, one in the middle, which was the regularly scheduled one, was quite the record. Since the last 3 sessions, and the appointment of a new minister, the purebloods had been encouraged to be more open-minded about the ones whom they once considered beneath them. This second emergency session showing the Mori of the demise of the most feared Dark Lord served to ease any remaining fear that people had. The change was afoot. Hogwarts education policies were updated to include useful mundane subjects and programs. 2 new subjects called Non-Magical Life Skills, shortly called NMLS, and Mundane General Knowledge and Current Affairs, shortly called MGKCA, were introduced and made compulsory for all the magically raised children. MGKCA was also compulsory for the non-magically raised ones as they spent most of the year at Hogwarts. All the wizards and witches who frequently dealt with the non-magical world had to attend the same 2 compulsory courses. These courses were also thrown open for other magically raised wizards and witches too who wanted to learn more about the world that they had looked down upon before now. The rate of withdrawal of normal-borns, half-bloods, and squibs from the magical world went down as they were encouraged to study both magical and non-magical subjects, and the bigoted hiring practices were changed. The school doors were thrown open for squibs too, for the study of not only the mundane subjects but also the usual subjects which did not require the active use of magic like herbology, COMC. And a major chunk of potions too. The improved hiring practices and the new stance about the non-purebloods gave the ministry and various companies a greater and more intelligent and skilled workforce. Soon, there was a talk of setting up a magical college and a university. At these 2 new institutions, masters of their subjects would be able to teach the higher level in a proper classroom setting. Dumbledore continued to be the headmaster for a few more years and led the change. He and his deputy, and later encouraged by their initiative, the other magically iced teachers took the NMLS and MGKCA courses so that they could understand their non-magically raised students' backgrounds better as their number had increased over the years. Professor Snape, after the revelation at the Wizengamot about the passing of Voldemort and showing the proof through his dark mark-free arm, resigned from the school saying he had enough of dunderheads. It was said jokingly, of course. He merely wanted a well-deserved break as he was no longer obliged to play the double game and wanted to do some brewing and research in peace. A few years down the road, when the magical call Leger named the Lily Potter College of Magic and Science was established, though, Professor Snape was one of the first applicants for the potions professor's job, as there he would get to teach the older and more knowledgeable students. As per the new hiring practices, he would have been put on probation for 3 months, but considering his past record at Hogwarts, he was put on probation for a year, which he accepted without complaint. It was cut short to 6 months though, as the college students only had praise for their potions professor. It seemed Professor Snape had gone through a complete attitude change. During the time he was only brewing and not teaching. Unknown to others, the time away from Hogwarts had led to Professor Snape closely judging himself through the use of his pensieve, and he did not like the kind of man he had become. It worsened when he thought about what Lily would have felt, especially about his treatment of her son. Professor Snape had by that time also found his courage and proposed to Professor Babbling, who he discovered had a lot in common with him. He used to visit her from time to time after he resigned from Hogwarts, and they had become really close. By the time he applied at the college, they had married and had 1 boy called Matthew, named after his wife's favorite grandfather, and 1 girl, Lily. The reason for the name was obvious. He had also taken his godson Draco aside, and opened his eyes as to what it was to be in the service of the Dark Lord. In the coming years, Draco turned a new leaf. He would go on to marry Tracy Davis as he found Pansy too clingy to her old beliefs and not willing to change. They would have a son, Scorpius. At Hogwarts, after Professor Snape resigned, they appointed, as the new potions professor, Jayesh Patel, who surprisingly turned out to be the son-in-law of Dr. Samir, call me Sam, Savon living in the U.S. He and his wife, on hearing about the changes going on in Britain, were eager to return as Jayesh's parents also lived in London. Jayesh had a double mastery in potions and chemistry. His classes were like a breath of fresh air to everyone. He also introduced safety protocols like the usage of goggles and dragonhide gloves, and a ventilation system to suck out poisonous fumes, and this was later made into a standard across all the potions labs throughout the Isles. Another improvement in the school curriculum was the introduction of botany as a supplemental subject to herbology. It opened a whole new avenue for research in Britain. Imagine looking at the parts of magical plants through a microscope and understanding them even further. An Australian Muggle-born who had a master's degree in botany from one of their non-magical universities and the highest Newt score in herbology was appointed as a teacher there. Both the herbology and botany professors could be found discussing things in each other's rooms usually. Neville was the most excited by the new subject and the possibilities it opened up. He would be the first student to attain mastery in both subjects. He would later go abroad for higher studies in those two subjects, and then go on to head the ministry's herbology and botany research department. His girlfriend and future wife, Hannah, was more interested in combining magical and non-magical healing, like she had heard of some wizards and witches in other countries. She would go on to open a super specialty clinic that used both magical and non-magical means to scan and heal not only magical patients but also their non-magical families, if any. The school also introduced magical and non-magical language courses. The introduction of the microscope and other non-magical devices in the magical world also led to many other discoveries, one of which few years down the road would be the cure to lycanthropy. Remus Lupin's name was the first one put forward for the cure by many when it was announced. He had remained a model citizen in spite of the prejudice he had to face earlier and was respected and well liked by his former students at Hogwarts. Once cured, he finally gave in to the attention being heaped upon him by Nymphadora Tonks. They soon married and had one son who was a metamorphagus like his mother. Dumbledore retired a few years after Harry passed his newts from Hogwarts with flying colors. Harry had taken up ancient runes too as an independent study, on being encouraged by his godfather who taught him in his free time. Harry married Hermione. The Yule Ball in their 4th year brought home the fact that Hermione is a beautiful girl, and on realizing that he had feelings for her, he asked her to be his girlfriend. Their time spent together in the later years as prefects and later as head boy and girl only intensified their feelings for each other. Harry's love of flying had converted to his career. He finished his non-magical education, and then after obtaining a rune's mastery, he went on to learn to fly aircraft and then studied aerospace in the U.S. He also studied designing at one of the institutes there. Years down the road, he would go on to become the head of Britain's first magical space program, while his wife served as an advisor to the Prime Minister. After retiring as a Minister of Magic herself, Hermione had first gone into law and later went on to become the head of the liaison office, which dealt with various magical races as well as their non-magical ministry counterparts. She had managed to get a law in place to stop the abuse of house elves, at last. Harry and Hermione together had 3 beautiful children who had a penchant for pranks. Saint-like the Marauders, and their heroes were Grandpa Padfoot, Moony, Uncle Gred, and Forge. Sirius married Amelia while Harry and co were still at school. They named Harry the godfather to their son, James. Fred and George married their Yule Ball dates, Angelina and Alicia, and played in Puddlemere United under their former Gryffindor captain, Oliver Wood. After retiring from Quidditch, the twins started their joke shop, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, while Angelina started a sports accessories company and Alicia became a Quidditch instructor at the newly set up British Sports Academy, where both magical and non-magical sports were taught. A surprising thing was the dating and marriage of Ron Weasley and Daphne Greengrass. If Ron was fire, Daphne was ice. Hermione's friendship later with Daphne had brought the two in contact with each other actually. They really matched each other well. Ron joined his dream team, Chudley Cannons, and a few years later, brought them to the top 3 with his strategic gameplays while Daphne went to work for the International Magical Cooperation and would go on to head the department. Ron would later go on to become head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports after joining the ministry after retiring from Quidditch. The appearance of the kids of all these, almost a year after the other, all with a penchant for pranking would leave Professor McGonagall wishing for early retirement. That's it for today, I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to check out author of this story. Details in description.